Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. A few technological issues. It wouldn't be a normal day if we didn't have a few technology issues. My name is Loretta Dignam. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Menopause Hub and Menopause Hub Academy, an organisation or business I set up born out of my own experience of going through menopause. And what we decided to do, because Saturday is World Menopause Day, Saturday the 18th of October. It's been running since 2009, by the way. So it's an opportunity to put a spotlight on menopause and women's health, not only personally, but in the workplace. So I'm actually joined on our panel today to talk to three amazing women whom I admire deeply. And I am thrilled to be having the opportunity and for you to join us to listen to us have this conversation. The title of the webinar is called, Breaking the Cycle. Is biology holding women back, or is it workplace culture? I'm not sure we're going to resolve all of the world's problems today, but we will definitely have a go. And I'd like to introduce you to our guests, and you can say a little bit more about yourselves, because I probably never do you justice. But we have Elizabeth Sheehan, and she's the country executive for the 30% Club. Elizabeth and I worked together years ago when I worked for Mars, Master Foods. So, and she's gone on to do amazing things. So, Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself first? Then I'll go on to Alison, and then I'll go on to Jane.
Thanks,
so,
Loretta.
Elizabeth.
I will. Thanks a million, Loretta. First of all, I want to say thank you to you, Loretta, for inviting me along and us along to this important webinar today, but also for really highlighting the fact that menopause even exists. I think you have been a pioneer in this space, and it's really important to, fundamentally, women's biology is very predictable. We all go through these things, hopefully. And so, I congratulate you for all that you've done and really shifting the dial and making a difference for a lot of us women. So thank you for that. Yeah, Elizabeth is my name. I'm the country executive for the 30% Club, and the 30% Club is all about encouraging female leadership. 30% isn't a target, or it certainly isn't the ceiling. We like to think that it might be the floor of our target. And we know that when we have a minimum of 30% females in a leadership team or in a board, we know that businesses perform better. So we're a business organisation. We support businesses to support female leadership. I'll pass it on then.
Yeah, no, what I think is great about that, first of all, thank you, Alison, but I think that's great about that is that, it's like a business case, really, isn't it? And often people will say to me, well, that's all very well, but what's the business case?
Yeah.
And I think what you've just described is a business case. And it's sort of beyond me as to, how we can't get up there in terms of the numbers, but we'll get on to that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But you're very welcome, Elizabeth, and you're doing stellar work where you are. Next up is Alison Hodgson from, she is the country market manager for, country market director for CIPD. And Alison and I came across one another a few years ago, and I've been admiring all the work that she's been doing. She's doing great work now in her more recent role as leading up CIPD in Ireland. So Alison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Loretta. So I've just recently taken up the role as country director here for the CIPD in Ireland, even though I'm actually dialing in from Brussels today. But the CIPD is the professional body for the world of HR, learning and development, and OD. So all things to do with people in the workplace. And my personal interest outside of the professional interest is, of course, I don't understand why we would marginalise 50% of the population. Particularly when you look at Ireland at the moment as a country in full employment. We are entirely dependent on the 90,000 economic emigrants that come into the country. So why are we not continuing to throw the net wider and include everybody? And all that requires is for us to all pause, think, reset, and just be a little bit more open to being flexible. So that's me. We've got over 6,500 members in Ireland, across all industry sectors. So, we represent the full spectrum of the world of work in Ireland. And globally, we've got 160,000 members. So, yeah, I'll go now.
Brilliant. No, fantastic. And I think what you say is just spot on. Why would we marginalize 50% of the population? Like, it's beyond me. Anyway, I would like to pass on now to Jane, or to introduce Jane McEvoy. So Jane McEvoy is marketing manager at Musgrave, but she's also the co-chair of the LEAD network. And I've worked in consumer packaged goods myself. I worked for Mars, Diageo, Kerry Group, and organisations like that. And unfortunately, they didn't have a LEAD network when I was around, but I'm thrilled that they have one now. And I know she champions diversity and inclusion across the retail and consumer goods sector. So Jane, would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Loretta, for having me here today. So yeah, look, as you mentioned, about 2 years ago, myself and Sarah Ferguson from Kellanova set up Lead Network Ireland chapter. So it's a pan-European organisation across retail and FMCG set in place to advance female leadership. And in particular in our industry, obviously traditionally more of a male industry, that's really important. But I think in general to create a more inclusive industry, because normally inclusive policies and inclusive actions benefit all. And I suppose in the last year, Loretta, obviously how we engaged with you was one of the areas identified by our HR roundtable teams. This is a group of senior HR leaders as one of the points where women were dropping out of the workplace. And coming from your research, we know that 84% of women consider leaving work and up to 10% actually do going through menopause. So we created with yourselves an industry playbook that would support smaller businesses, a lot of very practical tips on things that often don't cost money, but again, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, it's thought going into how you can create an environment where people can thrive. And we have shared that with the industry, and we have also shared that with our European colleagues. And I was mentioning earlier, I'm just back from our conference at Milan, and something that was really obvious from our menopause breakout group was that Ireland is way ahead of the curve. And in fairness, Loretta, a lot of that is down to you and the work that's being done by the Menopause Hub to continue to keep menopause in the spotlight. Is that you or me?
Perfect.
Yeah, I think if we mute one of them, it's good.
Oh, good. You're now on mute.
Jane, will you go ahead? I can see either. I'm not on the camera either. But Jane, continue what you were saying, and we'll see what we can do about getting a camera on this situation. I can
You
see
are on
myself.
camera.
Oh, am I? Great.
Yeah, you look right. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sorry. So you look great. So sorry, Jane. Just continue that. So you said you're working on the playbook and you're in Milan, and that you're saying that Ireland is well ahead of the rest of the world.
Loretta, I was just saying that Ireland is very obviously well ahead of the majority of Europe, and that a lot of that is down to the work that you're doing and your team at the Menopause Hub, because as Elizabeth said, it's so important that we continue to talk about menopause, because it's only from normalizing conversations and from sharing with different generations that women know what to expect. Like, everybody's experience is individual, but I think previous generations, they didn't feel comfortable. There wasn't that psychological safety to share. There wasn't that societal safety or even acceptance I mean, heaven forbid you talk about a period, not to mention menopause. I mean, you know, you're literally putting your hand up to say you're aging out. So I just, yeah, serious kudos to you and the team for continuing to shine a spotlight on menopause.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Ireland and the UK are leading out globally actually on this, and it's you know, it beggars belief when you speak to people from our colleagues in, you know, Scandinavia and in continental Europe and the States, places that we would always imagine would be way ahead, and they're actually behind. So that's a bit of a shocker. Yeah, and it's great, and it's also companies like your own and people like yourselves that are help pushing these boundaries. But what I wanted to do was I was trying, what is the kind of link here is that, you know, obviously for decades, menopause has been taboo and secret and silent and all the rest. And it's only in the last few years through, you know, raising the profile, myself, other advocates, Joe Duffy, Davina McCall, you know, all of these people, that we've started to break down the stigma and taboo and start talking about it in workplaces and everything like that. And we're recognizing that there's a hidden cost to being a menopausal woman, whether you're whether you're in your personal life or in your business life or in your workplace life. And so, but in recent years, it's been broken. Ireland has introduced free HRT, and myself and another lady, we put together a petition to get that introduced. The government has done a lot of work in this space, and menopause gone from being more hidden to being a matter of kind of national policy. And I think the key thing, the lesson to be learned from this is that once you break the silence on say menopause or something else, or even mental health in the past, you create the space to talk about so much more. And that's why we've extended the conversation to talk about hormone and biology related issues that have long shaped, sorry, should I say, women's working lives. So whether it's menstruation, fertility struggles, pregnancy loss, postpartum recovery, conditions like endometriosis, they're now kind of coming into the conversation. And the other thing is that, you know, our generation is the last generation to put up with this silence and secrecy. The next generations, menopausal, perimenopause, no, millennial women are coming into menopause, and it's been referred to as the millenopause. And I know, looking at my own children who are like over 20, over 18, my kiddos, the way they embrace all of these topics is far different than we ever did. And so I think these topics are now coming out, and these individuals will be demanding more from their employers. So it isn't just about biology, though, it's about workplace culture. Too many women step back, step down, or step out at these critical moments in their lives, draining the leadership pipeline, widening the gender pay gap, and depriving organizations of experience they can't afford to lose. And so the real question is breaking the cycle. Is it biology that's holding women back, or is the culture and systems of work that have failed to keep pace with half the workforce? And we do know that the workforce was designed by men for men primarily, and this isn't a male bashing thing, these are facts. But I think the menopause has done stuff that can help us learn. So without further ado, let's get into how we can tackle these issues and change the entire trajectory of women's careers from their first period to the boardroom. So to all the panelists, just when we talk about barriers to women's progression, do you think biology, whether that's caregiving, maternity, or all the different things you've mentioned, or workplace culture plays the greater role in holding women back, or is it an interplay of both? So maybe I'd ask you, Elizabeth, to give us your words on that.
Delighted to. Thank you, Loretta. You know, first up to say, you know, as I said at the beginning, our lives, women and men's biological lives, are entirely predictable. We have a series of life events that we may or may not go through, but they're fundamentally, as you say, from periods through to potentially maternity, to caregiving, to menopause. You know, these are all very, very predictable. And sometimes we see that these have been treated as exceptions, not norms. And, you know, we've talked about in recent research about these ideas of almost like a glass wall that block our progression. Fundamentally, you know, but even before we reach the glass ceiling, these things can block us along the way because they've been very often unspoken about. And so fundamentally, I truly believe it's about culture. You know, I read a great phrase recently, which is that culture is formed by the worst behavior you tolerate and the best behavior that you promote. And I really believe that, workplace culture is what can really make the difference in this. But workplace culture very often, up until now, has made your biology quite costly. We've got presenteeism, the lack of flexibility, potentially a bias against career breaks that might be required because of different stages of our lives. And these can turn temporary but very predictable life stages into permanent career penalties. So absolutely, for me, biology isn't the barrier. In fact, it's our power. We wouldn't be here without biology, let's face it. It is culture. And so it's our systems and how we step into this and embrace the different stages of everybody's lives where they might have responsibility for both their self-care and care for others, and really ensure that we keep workplaces and businesses, as you say, the cost to business of losing people, experience, and we know, again, from research, that when you have a balanced leadership and when you have balanced businesses do better. You get better business results, faster innovation, more employee retention. So there's an awful lot of business reasons to do this as well as human ones.
Wow. I love that word predictable. I think that sums it up. And I think, the predictability means that from a leadership perspective, it's something that is going to happen time and time again. And therefore, you'd imagine that it would be easy to embrace that level of predictability, but maybe not. And if I move to you, Jane, what are your sort of thoughts around that as a question? And then we go to Alison.
Yeah, so look, I would agree with Elizabeth. I mean, biology shapes your key life stages. But if you think about it, women in particular, even today, are doing at least 40 hours extra a week on caregiving or free work in the household. So when you take that, plus a full-time job, plus menopausal symptoms, sometimes it's just the tipping point. And you can see how women just think, I can't deal with this, when you're having to perform at a really high level. So absolutely, culture can support that. It can accommodate that. And everybody's experience is going to be different. So there is no one size fits all. So really, I think having a policy in place, not necessarily just for the sake of a policy, but actually it's a signaling mechanism down from executive level to the business that this matters. We want to support our colleagues through this stage of their lives, normalizing the conversation and having webinars and different things to educate colleagues, to make people more empathetic, and also to support managers. So when a colleague is going through this life stage, that they feel comfortable to go to their manager, if not to have a conversation about what supports they need, even that the manager knows, okay, well, we're going to send them to HR, send them to OC Health, that there's a clear process in place so that there aren't those awkward conversations. There's that real stigma around menopause, but actually having the right supportive culture, it can allow people to feel comfortable and safe to look for support. There's nothing wrong with putting your hand up because, as Elizabeth said, we all go through these life stages and we're all impacted differently. But I think it's fair to say that when companies support colleagues and adapt with colleagues' lives, they give back so much more than they get.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Alison, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, both what Jane and Elizabeth said. But look, from an employer's stance on how they support their female employees, particularly in relation to health, has a profound impact on engagement, on reputation, on productivity, and on performance. And look, I sized the market in Ireland, so to speak. So it's a very difficult market to size, obviously, because there's so many variables and parameters. But if you just take the population, the female population in Ireland, aged between 45 and 55, you're talking in and around 350,000 people. So it
Wow.
is not insignificant. Before I took up this role 5 months ago, I was always in HR. And when I first moved to Dublin, I was the country HR director for McDonald's. And we had an ethos that you were either at any one given time a colleague, a customer, or a competitor. So why would you not want to make sure that you are optimizing and including and getting the most from and bringing all of that 350 odd thousand people into your ecosystem, be that a competitor or a customer or a colleague, to play their part? I just don't know why it doesn't happen more than it has done in recent years. And Loretta, you referenced leadership. And one of the things that we as leaders all do is we all run a risk register. And risk registers require you to scenario model. And I think when you apply the concept and the principles of scenario modeling to the acquisition, retention, development, productivity of your female employees,
Mm-hmm.
the numbers will quickly stack up for you to go, whoa, why is this not on the risk register right at the top of the people section of the risk register? Because even if it's not your employees, the stance that you take becomes very well known out there. We live in a very open world now, where transparency is omnipresent, and so your customers will know if you as an employer do not treat your female employees and colleagues well and with consideration and with support. Customers walk with their feet. So vote with their feet even. I'd like to think they vote with their feet, but they do vote with their feet as well. But yeah, so for me, it's just this, it's all very obvious. And it's less obvious and actually trickier to not do this and to not have this be part of, the way in which we all work. Like that's a lot of people in Ireland that are not being included.
Absolutely. And what I find fascinating is that when you look at the result, the stats of, male and female coming out of school, coming out of university,
Mm-hmm.
etc., going into jobs, going into positions and whatever, that, the females get better results in general in those exams and stuff. They then, go into the workplace in equal sort of as part of graduate programs and all the rest. And then, as soon as I suppose they get into the sort of the reproductive stage, then they start to fall off, and the people that are left are going into the management positions and more senior positions and so on. And that's so we're all equal going into the funnel of the
Mm-hmm.
workplace in a way, and then at points we drop off, we come back, we drop off, we come back, whatever. I think and so that's what we're trying to get at today. But if I go to Elizabeth about the 30% club, and what are the barriers that you do see in terms of women progressing to board level and so on, and what are the levers, or what can organizations do
Yeah.
to facilitate, people have asked me before. I chaired the Gender Equality Committee on the board of the Abbey Theatre when there was a
Mm-hmm.
massive issue in the theatre sector around number of female playwrights, directors, all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And people said to me, what's your belief on quotas, Loretta? Where do you stand on quotas? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, if it happens organically, we don't need quotas.
Yeah.
However, it's not happening organically, so we need quotas. So, and it's the day that we do no longer need a quota, well, then we'll get rid of them. But
Yeah.
until that day, we need to do things to help. So anyway, over to you, Elizabeth, because I'm dying to hear what those barriers that you see are, and what organizations can do about it.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that point about people falling out of their career at different stages, and I think that's one of the pieces that we really are focusing on at the 30% Club, because we ask ourselves exactly that question. 50% fundamentally of graduates tend to be, the world is 50-50, or actually 51-49, I believe.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, we start our careers and there are stages and very, very linked to this very topic of menopause, but also all of our biology and all of the different stages of life. So we're really seeing that, female leadership can be sometimes a victim of life stages and the fact that workplaces are not necessarily set up to support people as they move through those life stages. So we did a piece of research earlier on this year in the 30% Club, and we entitled it Breaking Glass Walls. I mentioned the glass walls earlier on. So it's about, you know, the things that might hold you back throughout your career, not necessarily just at the very top. And we spoke about the idea of, you know, new organisation, of modern organisations having a really new shape and really focusing on things that are important, like empathetic leadership, like understanding and listening to your colleagues, and like taking things like all the elements of your health and your biology and your care cycle into account. So, you know, and we spoke a lot about care. In fact, we even coined the phrase care economics, because we've realised through the research that care is actually a business issue, and it's not just for me to worry about as my personal issue. We found that over 30% of employees who have caregiving responsibilities, and care, by the way, in that I would say is a very broad sense, because that's the other piece. Care is about self-care. It can be about our health care. Sometimes we need to take time for our health care or for others' health care. It can be about family care, and it can also be about elder care, which is a really big piece that comes along at a certain stage of life. That very often we might be in menopausal, teenage care and elder care, all, and they're stacking up. And they are very often reasons why women say, I am not in a position to keep driving my career forward at this moment in time. Maybe I'm not going to put my hand up for that role as a partner in a big firm, or for that promotion, or for whatever that may be, because there are just many things stacking up at this stage of life. But we found as well that, you know, 40% of working parents also considered leaving their jobs because of the inadequate family support policies, which is really high. And that's parents, that's across men and women. And an interesting little insight, I thought this data point was interesting, which was that 41% of women who have caring responsibility, so probably in that case, you know, it's either for children or it's for elders or it's for others, they felt that being a carer was completely incompatible with their own career progression. However, 31% of men who had those same responsibilities felt the same. So there's, you know, again, us women sometimes do that piece where we self-nominate and almost don't have the conversation. To say, you know, guess what? I'm in this phase. It may not last forever, but actually I need to put my hand up and talk about it, as Jane said, and actually raise the awareness within my firm. Now, that's very hard to do, to be the only person with that voice. And we often talk about being the only. So, you know, what can firms do? What can organizations do? Well, I think offering flexibility is probably the number one thing. You know, we've seen again in the same research that 71% of employees say that work-life balance policies have really improved their own well-being, and that flexible work arrangements around their health and others' health has contributed to them. And actually, we've seen a 68% of reduction in absenteeism. So people not having to kind of pretend that they're doing something else and heading out to take care of themselves or others, but actually, you know, this loyalty that it can really be gained by having overt policies where people can actually put their hand up and parent out loud, as we say, or menopause out loud and say, look, I need a little bit of time out. I need to go see somebody. I need to go do something, or care for family, etc. out loud. And it pays organizations back. And I think that that's the piece that I'm very passionate about, is that, you know, you get the benefit on both sides. Both your employees benefit from, you know, feeling like they belong in a culture that they can actually be their true selves and bring the true self to work, and hopefully stay and have a lovely long career in an organization, but also that it pays back the businesses, you know, longer term. So policies are important. And also, this is, and again, back to you and the great work you've done. You know, now we're talking, and many organizations have those menopause policies. They actually have them. They have also fertility policies, pregnancy loss policies. These are things that we never spoke about a number of years ago. And, you know, if you have those, you're bringing all of the life experiences of your employees into consideration. And then, you know, and then obviously you can work around it. And then the other thing we always say is, sponsorship and mentoring, actually having the ability, and a little ad for the 30% Club, we run mentoring programs with the IMI, and having that piece where we can learn both as mentors and mentees across each other to say, you know what, we actually need to do this in our organization, it's working in yours, etc. So there's a little bit about kind of opening up the conversations that really, really makes the difference, but then having those policies. And sorry, I'm going to go back to one question you asked me earlier there, which was about targets and quotas. Not that big a fan of a quota, but I think it needs to be done sometimes to make that step change. But I think targets can really, really influence overall culture. Quotas tend to, okay, I've got to get that number in, and I'm going to try and hit the number. But actually, it's that piece of saying, look, this is the target, and we're going to embed it in our culture. And I think that's where you see the real lasting change.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And if you also have it as part of some board KPIs, I think it's fantastic as well, is to say, we're going to target this and we're going to measure it and we're going to report on it. Yeah,
I love
do your risk register, do your risk register, do your scenario modeling.
I love that point.
Yeah, it's just it's so obvious. It happens for every other facet of the world of work. So it's kind of, it can be exasperating that such an underserved population in the world of work is not being addressed and managed and proactively looked after from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I love statistics. I'm a big fan of the old statistics, and the reason being is that they, give you a sense of the size of the issue, and then when you have the qualitative stuff behind that, you get a bit more of understanding of the why behind the numbers. So I like that. Alison, from a CIPD perspective, what role do you think people in people strategy, HR, policy, leadership, accountability, and so on play in either reinforcing or dismantling those barriers?
I think all of those things play both of those parts. So if I look at us as an employer, so the CIPD globally employs in and around 350 people. And in the UK, we signed the Menopause Workplace Pledge, which was created by a charity, Wellbeing of Women. You probably in 2021. And therefore, as an employer, we committed to the three things of recognizing that menopause can be an issue in the workplace, talking openly, positively, and respectfully about the menopause, and then thirdly, committing to actively support and inform employees affected by the menopause, which to my mind is all employees, because everybody is affected by the menopause. But as a professional body, we launched our supports for our members on our website and in our learning hub in our website, guidance on the menopause in 2019. So we've been providing templates, fact sheets, policy frameworks, frequently asked questions, various PowerPoint slide decks that you can use for your communication, various decision-making trees, all of that sort of stuff we've been providing that for our members since 2019. And I think sometimes you need to start where you're at as an organization and kick on from there. But then in other circumstances, depending on how the challenges are manifesting, you might need to do a zero build base exercise. Just start from the beginning. If you were starting now, what would you do? What would you want? What would be best practice? What is just entry level? So it serves to both dismantle and enhance, I think, in terms of policies and practices. But look, as Elizabeth plugged the 30% Club, if you're a member of the CIPD, you can get all of these templates and frameworks and fact sheets and models and resources, and a community that connects you with other employers and other workplaces around the world, actually, that have gone through this or you can pay it forward and reach out to other people who are about to start they're going through it. But look, it's there. We have a wealth of resources.
Brilliant. That was early 2019 to be doing anything around menopause, but I think you're right, and it shouldn't always have to fall to HR to drive
Yeah.
these agendas. I don't think so. I think leadership in its widest sense should be engaging and driving some of these things as well as the employees, at the grassroots level, kind of trying to push different
Look,
agendas.
so just to sort of be supportive and understanding of leadership,
Yeah,
I find one of the challenges of the menopause is that can be considered a temporary, reversible, acquired condition or state. Um, I know. Now, it's not formally recognized that by the WHO or stuff like that, but there's a lot of work going on for it to be recognized as such. And I think one of the tricky parts for leadership in the world of work is that the menopause and symptoms of the menopause are not linear and not necessarily progressive. And therefore, back to Jane's point earlier about one size does not fit all, personalization, and that does require people to sort of stop, pause, step back, and think about it, because it's not linear. It's not like your capability and your skill set in other parts of your job, where you do go from this level to this level to this level, and hopefully, all things being equal, your performance is commensurate alongside that. So I think that for me is one of the things that it's nuanced, it's complex, it's exceptionally unique to every single individual. And that makes it tricky in the workplace.
yeah. I guess my view, I suppose as well. Yeah, I hear you on that one. Is that I think leaders, if they want to be really good leaders, need to be prepared to have the conversation, whatever the conversation is,
Exactly.
about anything, about anything. It could be
Yeah.
a male with health issues. It could be a male
Right.
with, caring issues. It could be
Mm-hmm.
a female. It could be, any of these things. Um, and it's to be able to have the conversation. And managers and leaders can't be experts in every single thing. You can't be an
No.
expert in fertility, endometriosis, pregnancy loss, blah, blah, blah. You can't be an expert in prostate cancer and so on. But one of the things is to be able to have that conversation and not shy away. And then secondly,
Mm-hmm.
be prepared to look for the supports within the organization, and if they don't exist, to try and drive those levels of supports and so on. So that's the thing, I think. And I think, since
Mm-hmm.
COVID, there's been a lot more asked of leaders and managers.
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time, our work life was very much, our work life, and our personal life is our personal life, and there was a bit more of a wall. But since COVID, obviously, we've seen inside people's houses, we've seen their pets, their children, their delivery men, their wallpaper, well, paint, whatever. And therefore,
Inside their
it's kind
hotel room.
they're inside their hotel room. You can see he just arrived today.
Yeah.
So as a result, we're getting to see into the lives of individuals in a way that we never did before. And that has kind of blurred lines, so to speak. But if I just go to
I think
you,
that's a good
sorry,
thing
go
though,
ahead.
Loretta, because I think it's
Yeah, no, no,
humanized
no,
people, because
absolutely.
it sometimes, again, we like people to fit into a certain box, but actually seeing people's lives and how they're experiencing, there's a very different relationship with people. So yeah, I think it kind of disrupted everything and got us to think a little bit differently, which I think, yes, it was a horrible time of our lives to go through, but actually sometimes we need a little shake up to change how we look at things.
Well, no,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. And what I'm saying is, though, that the managers' conversations maybe before that were
Yeah.
more just around the work, the performance, the
Yeah.
Yeah.
work, the project, the deadlines, the
Very
deliveries.
binary.
Whereas
Very
now they've
binary.
had to become
Functional.
much more,
Yeah.
yeah, do you know what I mean? Human, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose,
Yeah.
which is, and therefore managers and leaders need to equip themselves to have those conversations, to be in a position to talk about anything that may come across their desk as such. But I wanted to go to you, Jane, and the Lead Network, and to ask you a little bit about, in your sector, which is in particular the CPG, which is consumer packaged goods, what do you see as the biggest barriers for women and their progression in these industries and sectors? And what changes could or would have the greatest impact, do you think? Because you're in like retail as well as consumer packaged goods. There, you could have people in a factory scenario, you can have someone in a checkout or in a warehouse, as well as desk-based jobs. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what the barriers are and what things work well to improve that for women.
Yeah, Loretta, I guess there's your cultural barriers and your structural barriers. And it is very different. And at Musgrave, we found that, so we were having success in terms of supporting colleagues at a head office level, but we weren't seeing that flowing through to our warehouse operations or our stores. And we needed to think differently about how we engaged them, how we, for example, if there was a webinar going on, how were we giving them permission to take that time off the shop floor to watch the webinar, take part in it? And a lot of it is the small details, Loretta. So simple things like, do people have a uniform that fits? If they're going through menopause and they're on the shop floor, is there somebody who could cover them if they had a severe hot flush? It's considerate management, I think. Thinking about those little details. Have they got an extra uniform? And then at a head office level, if the person could be going through sweats, they could be going through horrendous sleep patterns, lots and lots of different symptoms. Do they have to be in the office? If there's an option for them to work from home for a period of time, is that possible? And they're the types of things that create the environment for somebody to, when they're literally just hanging in there, to stay on on their career track. It just gives them that little bit of support to allow them to keep going. And then other things that really help, and this would be both at a store level and at a head office level, which Elizabeth already called out, are your mentorship, giving that guidance and helping people to, I guess, seeing something in people that they may not have seen in themselves, and helping them to believe in that and follow that path. And then sponsorship is so key. And I guess, because that's the thing that actually shifts the dial. That's the thing that actually moves women from being junior managers, middle managers to senior leaders within the business. You have to be pulled up. So sponsorship is really key. And I also think role modeling is really key. So in our business, our chief commercial officer and our director of insight and innovation, both at different points in their career, went to a 4-day week and went back to a 5-day week, but stepped into more senior roles again. So I think in terms of one, Musgrave, in terms of creating that culture, but also that role modeling, and also those women in terms of their bravery to believe in themselves, that they were good enough despite needing that time and taking the courage to take that time, being able to step back in and step up when they did. So there are lots of things that can be done, but a lot of them are very, very simple things. And then alongside that, supporting people to make that next step and also to stay there, to stay with it. And those manager conversations, I think, are just so important. And the manager really can be the difference between somebody staying or just saying, I just can't anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm conscious of time, and I know we want to go to some questions. So if people want to pop some questions into the chat, we'd be delighted to take those, and we'd provide a few minutes in a couple of minutes for that. But I just wanted to ask a question about, leadership behavior and tone from the top. How, I mean, we know that that's important, but, how important is that in reshaping the culture to be more inclusive? And is that what sets the great companies apart?
Absolutely. It has to come top down, Loretta. Has to. If your CEO and your exec board aren't behind your initiative, it's never going to succeed, because the minute things get tough, it's going to get deprioritized. So there has to be commitment there. It has to be long-term commitment. We spoke earlier about quotas and targets, and the research points to soft targets. So rather than saying, right, we need to do 10% a year, instead to say, right, we're going to reach 50% over the next 10 years, because there are going to be things that will be outside of our control that will impact those numbers year on year. And then even the same with quotas. In theory, I am 100% behind quotas. But in practice, again, the evidence shows that actually there can be a real backlash. So women in particular who are brought in on the back of a quota, they're seen, even if they were absolutely perfect for the role, they're seen as a token colleague who should never have gotten the role. And look, ideally we get to the point where we're not even having this conversation, where we don't have to say, oh, there's another, you know, that conversation where you hear it, there's another woman got a role. But yeah, so I really think it has to come top down.
It's in, sorry, go on. Who wanted to say something?
Yeah, for me, I was just going to say
Yeah.
it is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It cannot be normalized without leadership, board sponsorship, and actually the top person living, breathing, living it. It just has to be.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was saying to Jane, I met the CFO of Musgrave today, Andrew Keating, who is one of the, you know, proponents of diversity and inclusion for many, many years, and he's spoken out, you know, and supported all forms of diversity for many years, and been a wonderful supporter in all the organisations he's worked in. But it was really interesting to listen to his perspective, speaking about, you know, that he considers that at least a third of his role is about leadership, and leadership beyond the finance function and beyond the board, but actually setting, you know, a tone and enabling great conversations and policies, etc., to happen in, you know, in an organisation as big as Musgrave. And I you know, really, I love to hear that when a leader sees that their impact is so much more than their function, if you like.
Yes.
And much more about, you know, this is the impact I can have. And you know what? It gives you purpose as well,
Yeah.
you know, and you can see the purposeful leaders tend to shine, you know, they shine both in their performance, but also in their lives, you know. And we found in that research that we did is that, you know, people are looking for modern leadership. They're looking for trust. They're looking for people to believe them when they're saying that, you know, I need to go and do something, be part of something. They're looking for that advocacy, so somebody else who'll speak up for them. And they're looking for role modeling. You know, they really are looking for people to stand out and saying, yeah, I need to head off now. I'm going to go to my son's GA match, or I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go to see my mother, who, you know, and different things like that. And that can really set a tone in an organization and a loyalty. And that pays back. Loyalty will pay, you know, you really see it. And then you'll think of the, you know, the younger modern generation that are coming in, who, you know, they expect these things. These are the norm. They expect their lives to be, full lives to be taken into consideration. And, you know, for that iceberg, that for more of it to be seen, as you spoke about earlier on. So I think, you know, empathetic leadership and allowing and giving our leaders a chance actually to breathe and do the things that they care about is really important. And just one point we were speaking around is, you know, there's a lot about managers having to have really important conversations. But, you know, as managers, we also need support. And you know, people are becoming managers at all sorts of stages in their careers, in early stages. So, you know, helping them support, whether that is mentoring, training, whether it's policies, whatever that is, you know, so as Alison said, using the tools that are available through amazing organizations like hers that actually allow managers to have the conversation. Because it's scary. I was there before. I remember, you know, first time being a manager going, I don't know how to answer this question, because I know what might be you said in the boardroom, but I know what this person needs in their life. So, you know, allowing that, because we know that great manager conversations can be literally the difference in somebody's whole career.
And the nice part is that has transitioned to the leadership, to the people managers. It's not just sitting with HR anymore. Back when I started HR 30 years ago, HR truly was tea, tissues, and Tampax. That was what we did. And so, you know, that has transitioned
Least of
all
the
now
time.
because it's so much more normalized now. And, you know, just to echo Elizabeth and Jane's comments earlier, Loretta, kudos to you because you have trailblazed this for the rest of us in Ireland. And it makes it a lot more obvious and pedestrian for organizations and workplaces to just follow in your footsteps. So
Yeah, no, yeah, thanks very much. I suppose outrage drove me. Like half the world goes through this and we didn't know anything about it and we didn't talk about it. But there was another instance I was going to give you, and this happened as a conversation, and this is about the tone from the top. So please put in your questions, because if you don't put in your questions, we won't be answering
we
questions.
talk, yeah.
We just keep talking till the end. But I remember working in a workplace, and I was reporting into the CEO, and the CEO, and it was a big company, and the CEO, oh, we've got a hand raised, so we're going to come to that now. The CEO said, I said, they were all about diversity and inclusion, DEI and all that. And I said, you know, it really comes from the top, and you don't have any females on the board. Why is that?
Mm.
Unless you have females on the board, things aren't going to change and people won't really believe you. Anyway, his response was he said, well, you know, been looking for that. We've been looking at that. And yeah, yeah, we have our eye on this particular woman, you know, but she really needs to be shit hot, you know, to get onto the board. I said, right, right, right. Why is that? And well, if she's not shit hot and it doesn't work out, we won't be getting another one. And I said, right, right, right. And tell me, are the rest of the men on the board shit hot? Like really shit hot, are they? And the conversation ended very quickly. It's like
Amazing. Yeah.
cliche. But
And
like
it's
being held to another
Yeah.
standard. Like
completely, and we hold ourselves to another standard sometimes, but also that piece of, and you know, we talk about it, the 30% club, this idea of being the only, you know, the only woman on the board, the only woman in leadership on on the management team, and it can be a very lonely place. Hence the 30%, because we say if there's 3 out of 10, then you don't even notice that there's three different people of a different gender in the room. But yeah, and they don't
yes.
all have to be shit hot; they can just be different.
Yeah.
And you know, we've seen, and there's been great progress made over the last 10 years. You know, the Isaac 20 went from 12% women on boards to now 40%. So that's great progress, but we're still lacking, you know, even in the Isaac 20, there's currently, I don't think there's any female CEO. So, you know, we need women in leadership positions so that these great conversations can continue, and that and basically difference and balance can just be normalized. And where we are globally right now, it's really important to bed down on that.
Yes. Sorry, that person who raised their hand has disappointed us. It was an accident. So we still don't have any questions. What I was going to ask Elizabeth then there
Yeah.
is that, you know, so what are the barriers? Are the women not coming forward? Is it they're not being, you know, offered the positions? Do they not have the confidence? Is it, you know, like what is it? Do you know?
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I guess I always don't like it when we say, you know, do women not have the confidence? I think sometimes we do self-select, and we know that we hold ourselves to usually quite high standards. You know, the stat about the criteria for a new role, you know, if we can't tick at least 80% of those criteria, then we don't even consider going for it. And I had an amazing HR leader once saying to me, you know, just go for it, you know, say yes until you have to say no, let them deselect you, don't deselect yourself. So I think that that's a piece there, but I don't think that that's the whole. I think it is definitely about looking at things like, you know, flexibility in our work, you know, good. I keep saying it, good conversations, you know, thinking about the fact that most people, male and female, will have some level of care responsibility along their journey, and to not feel like that they have to hide it. And you know, that work-life balance conversation that works again for us all, you know, it's really important. And that recognition that we need to support our leaders and our managers and all people going through to support each other, you know, and that we talk about allyship, we talk about advocacy, you know, I always say, you know, hell hath no fury, like you know, that when a woman doesn't take care of another woman, but it can happen. You know, be the advocate, watch out for people in your workplace, you know, like tap somebody on the shoulder and say, are you doing okay? those things matter. And even, you know, one or two simple conversations can make a difference on an individual basis. But definitely when it comes to organizations, taking balance and taking the fact that, you know, we know that organizations that have better balanced leadership, you know, really are better places to work, and taking it seriously. And, you know, is it menopause policies, childcare policies, family policies, looking at other models outside of you know, the Scandi approach. I know you've lots of experience with that, Loretta, as well. You know, that kind of taking those into account and looking beyond our own potentially smaller functional lens, I think, are really important.
Yeah. We do have one question, and it's from somebody who says, where is the question? She says it's gone now, is it? It was, oh yeah, sorry, I am peri, as in perimenopause. I was always confident to a point. Any tips on anxiety, brain fog when you have to speak on Teams or at meetings? And so what I would say to that individual is, I'm sure that's probably not the only symptom that you have. You should actually look, we have a symptom checker on our website. We should look at other symptoms. And what I would, and see, you know, do you need any help or any treatment with any of those? I would say, you know, in terms of helping yourself, I would write down points that I want to make. I would, you know, write down reminders.
Minutes,
Yeah,
scribble, just always, because we are humanly, you know, our brains are wired. When we physically write something, it goes in, it is easier to understand, and it is much more straightforward to recall, much more so than typing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have scribbles every which way.
And somebody's put into the chat our symptom checker, so you can have a look at that. But like, what I would say is that, you know, you need to use aids that will help you with your memory or help you with your various different things.
And your breath.
You know,
I think your breath work is so important, you know, remembering that
absolutely.
this, you know, get into your body and feel it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
always have a glass of water. Just always be, you know, just that's just, and then that becomes normal practice and routine and a ritual and a habit.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that, you know, like I've often sat on webinars or on meetings, and I'd have post-its stuck around my laptop saying, you know, don't forget to say that, don't forget to say that or that, or write it down. And then, you know, and to be honest with you, nobody knows when you're looking at your post-it, whether you're looking at your post-it or looking at them or looking at the camera or not. So I would say, you know, try and give yourself as many aids and tips and whatever. I'd also say if you're perimenopause, you probably have more than one or two symptoms. Have a look at that, and if you need help, seek help, and don't suffer in silence, was what I'd say. But that's what I would say. Take a deep breath before you speak, as you said, or a sip of water, and, you know, launch into it with your little post-it note sticking there. And, you know, they're the kind of cheats that we're all doing. I don't know if you call it a cheat, but they're the kind of things we're all doing. And
The
we all
habits.
look,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and we all look confident, and we all whatever, but we're all using all sorts of aids to help us, you know, through our day. And so it's a bit like having a calendar reminder. Like, you know, if I had to remember where I'm supposed to be half the time, I'd definitely show up in the wrong places. So I have that as my little aid, and therefore, you know, create aids for yourself. But anyway, it's now time to finish up. So I just want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much. Fascinating. Next time we're going to have men on it as well. We'd like to hear their
Absolutely.
perspectives of how they become male allies and help us figure this out as we go forward. But I look forward to the day when we don't have to have panels about women, we don't have to have empowerment breakfasts, we don't have to have quotas, we don't have to have any of those things, and that we're all just people. And that day will come. Yeah.
Yes, will.
Well done. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Loretta. Thanks a
Thank
million.
you very
Lovely to
much.
talk to you all.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
bye. Well done, Loretta. Well done.
Oh no, I miss sorry, the technology was a pain in the arse, but yeah, I just wanted to see who was on it, actually. That was the interesting thing. But yeah, listen, and great that people even know about your existence if they didn't already, to take back to
Yeah.
their organizations and things like that. Geez, I love all the work that you're doing there, Elizabeth. Geez, guys have loads of information and data and whatever.
Data, yeah, that was very useful because that's what gets you a voice.
I
When
know.
you've got
It's
the
great because,
data, then you have a voice.
yeah.
And the same for you in CIPD. You have a wealth of stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love your stat, Alison, as well, about the number of women between 45 and, was it 45
In
and
Ireland,
55?
45, 55, which is a tricky parameter to set, because obviously you've got medical menopause and perimenopause and stuff like that. But even just taking the bog standard
Absolutely.
age
Just
band,
as a rough number, it's a really important, you know, and again, think of all that wonderful experience and life experience and, you know, and the
and
value that you can add.
spending power,
Spending
and
power.
all
Yeah.
of that. It's
Exactly.
huge. It's huge.
Okay, I think we're still recording.
Oh,
Yes.
of
Yeah.
course we
So
are.
listen,
Yeah.
Thank
great.
goodness
Listen,
Thank you
somebody's
I
so
on with
will.
much,
us.
Loretta, again, and
Yeah,
thanks for all
thank
you do.
you.
Bye.
Brilliant. Thanks a million.
Thanks, then. Bye. Bye. Bye.